geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The View, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The View. The View is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Welcome, beloveds, to another week of The View, or The Voo, depending on how you call it, here on the weekly podcast show of the Church of the Larger Fellowship. I am Christina Rivera, she, her pronouns, and I am 1/3 of the lead ministry team here at the Church of the Larger Fellowship and one of the co-hosts of The View. Today, we also have Kiana Dene and Janine and DC as part of our regular co-host team. And we're pleased to have as a guest the Reverend Sarah Skochko. And before we get to that, we will do our usual co-host roundup. I'm coming to you from beautiful Central Virginia, where the weather indeed is intoxicated. It doesn't know if it wants to be spring or summer or winter. I just don't know anymore. All I know is the stink bugs are out, and that really bums me out. I like the warmth that comes with them, but the stink bugs, I could take it or leave it. No, I could just leave it. DC, how you doing?
I am doing well. I am coming to you from central Pennsylvania, the historical lands of the Susquehannock people. Yes, my cat caught a stink bug the other day, and was not impressed with the experience. So hopefully that was a lesson learned, and we won't have to deal with that again. The weather here is again weird. It was 80 yesterday, and it was 4 on Sunday, and yeah, I don't know what to do. But everything that has pollen got really excited about life yesterday, which like knocked me over in Sudafed and spicy soup. So, but it means that the snow is actually not going to come back. Like I'm pretty sure of that. Pretty sure. Speaking of snow, the most likely among us to get snow, Kiana Danae, how are you today, darling?
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't on mute because I'm good for that. I'm really good. So I am in Ann Arbor, Michigan. This is land that belonged to the Potawatomi people and was worked by Black and brown labor. Chris talked about it being, weather being chaotic. I feel like it's every person I've ever tried to date, there's like a ghosting happening and then a return as if I'm not supposed to remember. Like, this constant, like, it'll snow one day and then like 2 days later, it'll be like sunny and 70. And you're just supposed to be like, oh, I guess you're back. Hi, what are you doing today? And then a day later, I storm and you're just supposed to act like nothing like it's definitely we're dating and it feels just like my dating life. So, hey son, I'll see you for a little bit. I know you have to leave and disappear for a couple of days. Outside of that, I'm actually really good. I feel like there's a lot of energy in the UU world, and a lot of good stuff happening and a lot of good pulsing towards some, end of season things, for a lack of better language. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation and kind of diving into the goodness that is us, Unitarian Universalism. Janine.
Hi, friends. Good morning. I am coming to you from unceded Otham territory, also known as Phoenix, Arizona. Remember how every week I've been like, it's raining, it's raining. It's weird that it's raining. It never rains here. Well, all of that rain has created an incredible super bloom. So if you're like a nature photography person, you should Google super bloom Sonoran Desert because it is incredibly beautiful here. There's like little yellow and purple flowers all over the desert. Everything is gorgeous. I am a little bit clawing my eyes out with allergies. So are my children. It's a whole thing. But, I will take the Sudafed if it means that we get to look at this gorgeous scenery every day. So things are pretty beautiful here in the Sonoran Desert. Not our politics, but, the landscape is pretty right now.
Yay, team. I love all of the different descriptions of weather because we can be having very similar weather and we can be experiencing it very differently in true equity fashion. So we always take this time at the beginning of the hour to do a UU roundup. And so I'm going to ask if anybody has any UU roundup tidbits. I will share that the Church of the Larger Fellowship Board of Directors met for the first time in person since before the pandemic launch in 2020. This was the first time that the co-leads got to meet with the board in person. It was delightful. We didn't do it just to be able to be in person. We went to Montgomery, Alabama to be able to experience the Peace and Justice Museum and Memorial, which was a very powerful and moving experience. And you're going to hear much more about that in the coming months. But I just, a shout out for the board of directors, all volunteers, all folks who are super committed to Unitarian Universalism and the mission of the Church of the Larger Fellowship. So thanks to all of them. Thanks to all of the volunteers at the Church of the Larger Fellowship. Shout out for NOMCOM, Personnel Committee, fundraising, grants, the coffee hour facilitators. If you are not a coffee hour facilitator, please think about joining. It is so much fun. And we've got a team that is ready to train you up and show you the ropes and be with you. So come on down and see what you can do with that. other UU roundup?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Well,
Sarah?
it was match day last week, right?
It
Right.
was match day. So explain what match day is, Janine.
Oh, I'm probably the worst person to explain it, but I'll try to explain it from my non-ministerial perspective.
That's actually really good because, I think the majority of people out there in UU universe are non-professional
Right.
religious professionals.
All right. So my person on the ground perspective is, imagine every minister looking for a congregation and every congregation looking for a minister was in a dating app together. And they just have been swiping to see who they might like and who they're compatible with. Match day is when they get to find out their match or not. I mean, some of them don't get a match. There's a lot of stuff that happens. It's also kind of like if you're like a medical professional, like residency day, right? When residents find out what hospitals they matched with. So those are my layperson analogies there.
It's really good because
I call it Match.com meets the NFL draft.
right, and that's actually a really apt
Right.
description, because if you don't get matched, then you can go into the speed round, right? Which is like speed
Right,
dating,
yes.
Afterwards, where everybody who didn't get matched like has like this tiny bit of time that's like, oh, let's see if we can get matched. So yes, shout out to all of the folks.
Almost last call at the bar.
Right.
You guys are making ministry sound super sexy for this minister in training. Let me tell you. As a person whose question is dating life is the weather, you guys are not making this sound attractive at all.
No, it is very spiritually based and grounded in our faith, and there is a lot of prayer. No lie. There is a lot of prayer. There is a lot of angst. There is a lot of discernment. There is a lot of, what is the mission of this congregation? What do we want to do? How do we want to be out in the world? Who can help lead our spiritual development? Like, yes, we're definitely making light of it, but it is a very complex process that has a lot of people feeling a lot of feels. It's also the week that some congregations find out that their minister is leaving. To go to another congregation, and that they feel their call at that congregation has come to a conclusion or an end, and that their call is somewhere else. So there's lots of feelings all over the place out there in Unitarian Universalist land right now.
If
There
folks
are
want,
feelings.
if folks want to keep up with the news,
Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Go ahead.
if you're on Facebook, check out the Facebook page Hot Stove Report, which is where all of these matches between ministers and churches get posted. It's a very exciting time to be subscribed to that page.
Wait,
Yes.
who are you? Let's introduce Sarah. If you're going to chime in, we should tell people who you
Oh,
are.
right?
And we were like, who is this person here? We are so pleased to welcome the Reverend Sarah Skochko, who is a writer, minister who lives in Philadelphia. Yay, Philly. She has a YouTube series called Things Unitarian Universalists Should Know, or TUSK is how I call it. And it is fabulous. We're so excited to have you here today. Thank you, Sarah. And yes, welcome to the UU Roundup. Was there other things that you might have wanted?
Yeah.
Oh.
Get in there, Kiana Danae. I'm just the guest.
No. You're just a guest, but I didn't realize she was asking you. So I apologize, because I want to make sure that we don't forget that there's a spiritual vortex happening, right? So because it's Easter, Passover, Ramadan, and Earth Day or equinox happens this month. So we're kind of in this spiritual, I thought she was asking everybody, but Sarah, I said my piece. Now, Sarah.
I thought she was asking everybody too.
Oh, good.
There's so much exciting things happening in Unitarian Universalism right now. I just wanted to lift up, for one, the Uplift Collective. You can go to the upliftcollective.org, which is a group of amazing Unitarian Universalists who have a presence on social media that is affirming and fighting for trans rights. So pushing back against negative narratives.
Right.
And right now, with our trans siblings under such an incredible attack in society and on social media, where our society's discourse predominantly happens these days, this is such an amazing ministry, the Uplift Collective.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of, when we've talked on shows the last several weeks about all of the anti-trans legislation and ways that youths are pushing back. This last weekend, I was in Memphis, Tennessee. I went for my dear friend Sarah Osborne's ordination into ministry. She's part of the Beloved Conversations curriculum team that I worked on. And but we also got to see some amazing drag shows that were scheduled for the last night that drag was allowed in the state of Tennessee. And on the eve of the ban, the court actually issued an injunction halting that ban, so that that law is not yet in place. It'll have to go through the court system. But we did leave right before the shenanigans at the Tennessee State House, where the GOP members were calling on the expulsion for several legislators for protesting, saying that it was outside their decorum and code of conduct to be part of a protest. So that's definitely something that we're all.
Have y'all ever seen the Tennessee House?
Right. Well, and also, I mean, we all know protest is a guaranteed right in the U.S. And so we are keeping an eye on what's going on in Tennessee, because that's extremely important to all of us to make sure that our right to protest does not come with consequences of expelling our elected officials.
Yes. And
there's a whole lot of crazy.
Yeah, believe me, as much as I'd like to expel my elected officials in this area, I do want to make sure that there is some semblance of process around.
But as a voter, you get the chance to do that. The House
Not
Speaker
really.
or the President of the Senate does not.
Yeah, true. Very true. So we didn't have a view last week because many of us were at the aforementioned CLF board meeting. So I did want to shout out all of our trans siblings, because it was International Transgender Day of Visibility. Whoop, whoop. And
I'm not sure how much more visible I could get, but okay.
What's that?
I said, I don't know how much more visible I could get, but sure.
Sure, let's do it. Let's show all the things. But I just wanted to make sure that we often have congregations who really want to, commemorate the Trans Day of Remembrance. And it is just as important to celebrate the Trans Day of Visibility and celebrate the wins that we have and the people that we have in our lives, and we're so grateful for. So just want to put a shout out there to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. More.
Can we talk about Sarah?
I'm just dancing. I'm just
Before we move on to me, I also want to lift up, are you all familiar with the new UU Fat Liberation Group?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Those are my people.
I am so excited about this growing movement, which has been coalescing over a few years. This is a real issue in society, but still in Unitarian Universalism. And we have some fantastic fat allies who are trying to go to GA. And so the UU Fat Liberation Group has a Faithify campaign right now. If you want to check that out, I'm hoping they get to go have a booth at GA and spread some fat liberation gospel.
Well, so to speak to this on a very personal level, I'm a bigger bodied person. And as I travel and go do stuff, sometimes people put me in a twin bed. I'm 46. Twin beds are not my friend, no matter what my size, but it's definitely not. And also I find that seating in congregations can be very not my size. And so I literally have walked into places that I'm going to speak at or do stuff and have to walk the whole building to find a chair to accommodate my body to be comfortable in a space. And it's a little embarrassing. It's a little disheartening, and it's a little hard. It makes me feel less than welcomed when there's not a physical space that will hold my body. And so when I started seeing the fat liberation faithify stuff, I got excited because, you know, there's little things about GA we don't think about. Like if I have to walk 1.5 miles and then I made that journey and then there's nowhere for me to sit or to be comfortable, or a chair that hurts my body or digs into my skin, I don't want to be there. I don't want to give a business my money if the seating's not adequate. I don't want to be there. So I think, you know, all of the other commentary aside, creating spaces where people who want to be there can physically be present without wondering if they'll be safe and accommodated or safe and allowed to just be in their body. It's the work that we are committed to do. It's the work we say are our values. It's not extra work. It's not accommodating work. It's the work that we're called to do at the beginning, not as an aside, not as an amendment, not as a like, damn it, I have to accommodate this fat body. It's the work we were called to do from the beginning.
Yes.
Preemptive radical inclusion is what.
Exactly.
Say that again, friend. Say that again. It's what?
Preemptive radical inclusion.
CBBO?
Emphasis on the preemptive, which means you do it before somebody shows up and needs it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm going to drink water to that.
Yep.
And Tanner Linden, who is behind the chalice for many of our View episodes, almost all of our View episodes and many other places, recently told me less policy on accommodating different size bodies. So if you are, I'm not going to be plugging Southwest because, you know, capitalism, we've got other things to talk about. But if you're interested, go to their website and read up on some of the things that they're doing to accommodate differently sized bodies. I'm very excited to learn more myself.
It's called their POS policy for a person of size.
Thank you for,
and it's pretty cool.
Breaking down that acronym because it means a lot of different things in my
right.
world.
I was like, why would they call it that?
Right? Yeah. I'm in a Facebook group called Flying While Fat, which offers some very honest and vulnerable reviews of the experiences on various airlines in the U.S. and around the world. So far, United Arab Emirates is the best, but like you have to be, you know, sort of an oil baron to afford it.
Right. And they're not just going to, like, you know, the regional markets.
They're not going to Chicago. They're not going to Pittsburgh. No. All right. So.
And lastly, I want to give a shout out for the Article 2 Commission. This month, April, is the month to have amendments developed to be submitted to the board by April 30th. Be submitted to the board by April 30th. And I say it again, you need to have them submitted to the board by April 30th. Okay. We have a link in our chat that gives you more information about that. But we really, you know, we don't want to get to GA and have folks say they didn't know that this was going on. If you can hear my voice, tell 10 other Unitarian Universalists about the Article 2 conversation and ask them to tell 10 other Unitarian Universalists about the Article 2 conversation. This is all of us. If this, you know, if we get to GA and a bunch of people are like, I didn't know, that's not on the Article 2 conversation people, like the group. They're doing a great job getting this information out. It's also our job as Unitarian Universalists to get the word out. So again, if you can hear my voice, you need to be talking with 10 people and asking those 10 people to be talking with 10 people. It's our job to, even if you don't agree with it, if you agree with it, you don't agree with it, you want amendments, you want, like, the conversation is part of our covenant with one another. And we got to lean into that covenant.
Yes.
All right. I'm getting off my soapbox for a moment.
Now we have Sarah.
Now we have Sarah. Sarah, I don't even know where to begin. Like, folks know you from lots of different places, and you've been around the country, and you've got a delightful young person who is in your travels now. And we're not saying that delightful young one's name, but we try and love on her as much as humanly possible from afar. Yeah, where would you like to start with your UU story? Like, I have, some benchmarks. October 9, 2019, and all of that kind of thing. But where would you want to start?
Well, what would you like to know?
Well, I mean, I think. Go ahead, TC.
My first instinct is pastoral to ask, how are your friends in Ukraine?
So my Ukrainian tutor is now living outside the country. Things in Ukraine are kind of a mixed bag right now. For people who didn't see when I was on The View a year ago, I'm a Ukrainian American, so this is very close to my heart. What can I even say? Right now, the war is in this crummy phase where it's just a terrible grind. That I don't know when it's going to end. The Russians have about twice as many casualties as the Ukrainians, but they're infinitely more willing to throw civilians at this problem, which is inhumane and very sad. So many Ukrainians have left and gotten out of the line of fire, and so late into this conflict are basically just establishing new lives abroad, right? They have been able to come back. However, there have been some real points of progress for the Ukrainian people. So Russia's been targeting infrastructure, right? Heat is centralized there, not individual homes like here in America. So the Russians will knock out the heat and the power and the water. And Ukrainian utilities crews have been doing just this heroic job of restoring utilities basically every single night to keep hospitals and schools and other public infrastructure running. It's truly incredible. The major city of Kherson was liberated in November, which I just get chills when I think about it. Right? Ukraine is holding strong. Thank you for asking. But of course, everyone is looking forward to the day when all of Ukraine is free.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for the update. I've been thinking about you and about Ukraine as I watch the news and wonder what it's really like there,
Yep.
So
100%. So
I,
Sarah, what?
I want to know.
Go ahead, TC. No, you do.
No, I was just going to say, tell us about your videos. Tell us about your YouTube channel, because oh my God, the stuff I've seen there is just a hoot. It's awesome.
I took a long parental leave because I had the little tater tot and I was pretty occupied. But she's in daycare part-time now. Someone please contribute to my online fundraiser to help me pay to make these videos. And when she's in daycare, I produce videos called Things Unitarian Universalists Should Know. And a lot of my online ministry these days has to do with the alt-right movement within Unitarian Universalism, which a lot of us might not realize exists. For one thing, that there are conservative Unitarian Universalists, politically conservative. But moreover, there are some pretty far-right Unitarian Universalists. Yes. And some who wouldn't characterize themselves that way, but are pushing far-right ideas, right? So there's this rising strain of anti-trans hate among a small minority, a small but loud minority of Unitarian Universalists, right? Mostly among the gadflies. So I make videos and I also make other resources for congregations, right? Ever since the Gadfly Papers came out, I have been saying pretty publicly that this is not something we can ignore. I know there is a valid viewpoint that we shouldn't give the gadflies any energy, but that kind of allows them to move around secretly and infiltrate churches. And I have found in my work that when churches talk openly about this, they are better able to resist the gadflies within their own congregation who try things like Kiana Dene. Yes.
You're muted, honey.
You're muted. Kiana Denise, I bet you $1 million saying, can we say what the gadflies are?
Yes. I like to decode language. And so for me, asking that question is paramount to make sure we're all using the same language, the same definition, and nobody has any illusion about what's being talked about.
Yes.
Okay.
Because part of this show is about bringing the outsiders inside. So let's bring everybody inside the gadfly.
Thank you so much. So gadflyism is a movement that coalesced starting in 2019, but it had its roots prior to that. So around the time of the 2017 hiring controversy, which is when a lot of Unitarian Universalists started talking about white supremacy culture in our denomination, which was there before, but the conversation really became more widespread in 2017, is when we started seeing individual white Unitarian Universalists pushing back and reacting against that. And that's kind of a normal thing that white people do when they're first exposed to these ideas, is that they have some resistance and questions. And that's normal, right? A normal stage of progress. But some of those people became pretty radicalized and entrenched and started, what do I even characterize this as? Started trying to actively undermine their own churches and ministers because they were so resistant to the idea of racial justice. And in 2019, at the GA in Spokane, when Reverend Todd Eckloff distributed his frankly racist book, The Gadfly Papers, all of those individual Unitarian Universalists who were resistant to the progress of racial justice and anti-oppression work in Unitarian Universalism, they found each other over that book, mostly in Facebook groups discussing it, and they began coalescing into this movement. And now, almost 4 years later, they're actually quite organized with a number of subgroups, such as the Fifth Principle Project, which is kind of the political action wing of the Gadfly movement, the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Action Council, which, even though it says multiracial, is pretty flagrantly racist. And that's kind of the ideological think tank of the Gadfly movement. We also have now the Save the Seven Principles group, which is fairly new. And there is a good argument, for people who love the seven principles and want to hang on to them and don't want our principles revised or removed. That's fine. This group, though, is mostly gadflies, and I'm pretty suspicious of them for that reason. And we also now have the new, North American Unitarian Association, which swears that it is not a competing organization against the UUA, but if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck. I should, Kiana Dene, we were talking about this earlier, I should point out that just because someone is white and is not sure about all of this new anti-racism stuff, that doesn't make them a gadfly, right? That is someone who is at that place in their spiritual journey and in their learning. The gadflies are people who are entrenched and committed to undermining Unitarian Universalism from a place of white supremacy.
I asked Tanner to put at least me and Janine on, because I can't speak for anybody else, but Janine and I were talking about this a little bit before the show, because I texted her to say, do we have the link? But part of what I offered before we started, and I want to call Janine in on, is to say, how do we make those distinctions from folks who are, like you said, undermining power, and folks who are in a process of discernment? Because I feel like there's two, if not more, things happening. So Janine, can you speak a little bit to that? I want to just give you some space.
Yeah, I really appreciate, Reverend Sarah, that you mentioned the Save the Principles project. What's part of my work right now is doing a consultancy for the UA Board of Trustees around Article 2 organizing engagement. And one thing I've noticed working in churches is that the Save the Principles project is definitely pulling in a lot of folks who would not have at all been interested in the racist message of the original kind of gadfly movement. Regular UUs in the pews, folks that I, respect a lot and really like, really committed lay leaders. And they are kind of unsure about Article 2. And what I really appreciate that you said, Sarah, too, is that we need to have open conversations in our congregations. And one thing I'm really noticing is that our tendency to be conflict avoidant in congregations is letting this movement pick up speed and pull in people that are feeling hesitant about Article 2, or even just people that are like, oh, I really liked our principles because no one ever taught me anything different. This is what I learned as a UU. This is what I thought we believed. And so because and when I say we, I want to say like Unitarian Universalism writ large, right? Like Christina, you said this is on all of us to talk about Article 2. It's not the UUA or anyone else. Because we didn't necessarily do a great job communicating about Article 2, organizing around Article 2, and educating around Article 2 in a way that really engaged regular UUs in the pews. We let the Seven Principles Project, frankly, counter-organize ahead of us. And so, like you said, they're very organized. They're calling congregations. They made their own list. They're calling on the phone. Hello, this is Janine calling from the Seven Principles Project. Would you like to save our principles? This is what you need to do. This is how to get your delegates together to vote against it. And I think open conversation is really the only way that we're going to combat this, and it has to take place in congregations. So can you tell us a little bit about the consulting that you do? Because I think that's really important. I know there's a lot of congregations that are kind of wondering what to do, and sometimes they're getting this message that they should just ignore it. So tell us what your strategy is around that, Sarah.
Yes, thank you for asking. So I do occasionally consult with churches and do trainings with boards and other committees, for instance, nominating committees, search committees, to get them up to speed on the history of this movement in Unitarian Universalism and common tactics that they use to influence churches and subvert power. For better or worse, Unitarian Universalists, this is a big generalization, forgive me, not all of us, we do have this culture of conflict avoidance, but we also have this theological undercurrent of self-martyrdom that it makes us more, enlightened if we are able to tolerate the bad actors among us, that we can pat ourselves on the back and say, Jim disrupted church this morning, but we love him and we'll let him stay. Well, maybe Jim needs to go because Jim has chased away all the Black people at this church by making them uncomfortable. Women won't come anymore because Jim keeps harassing them. I don't think we should be patting ourselves on the back for how tolerant we have been to Jim. And so and that's kind of blunt, but I do consult with boards to talk about what it means to hold real standards for the gadflies in your congregation. No, you may not teach a class about this racist book, right? No, you may not personally email everyone in the congregation with your grievances about the minister and the DRE who's running anti-racism classes, right? We do need to hold firm boundaries. And so I do offer this consulting service.
So prevalent. It makes me think of something that's kind of prevalent in our communities. And I want to talk about accountability, right? Because trust and believe, I feel a sense of accountability as a large-bodied Black queer woman walking into churches. I know all eyes are on me. I know everything I say is being at least watched or ticked off somewhere. I know everything I post is being monitored. And I'm held to a standard of accountability for how I impact the community. And here's this whole other group of people who aren't being held accountable in the same way. Jim is allowed to do things in the community that are out of relationship, that don't feel good, that are damaging. And so it makes me think of the basketball thing that just happened this week, right? Where the same gesture is perceived one way and somebody else does it another. And we have that going on in our churches, right? So like my calling out, like, no, you don't get to touch my hair, gets, oh, she's got an attitude. I don't know if this is, but nobody's calling out the person who touched my hair, right? There isn't any accountability for them. I'm just using that as a worst case possible and probably as happened scenario. But that is to say, how do we lean into accountability for everybody? How do we engage our covenants and not just perfunctory read our covenants, right? How do we say, we said these words at the beginning, we say them every Sunday, they're printed everywhere, they're in a big poster in the front of the room. Now we have to walk into them and live into them. And I guess for me, as a wraparound, it brings me back to Article 2. Something I was reading this morning said, we're moving from, we have the potential, the process is there and engaged, to move from principles that are aspirational into a set of verbs and action words that actually enlist another covenant inside of them to engage each one of those. So where some folks feel like there's this lessening, there's a deepening of accountability and naming what we are called to do without question. So how do we build in accountability in communities that are so used to not holding people accountable?
Of the Gadfly movement, Sarah, about accountability and how they don't want accountability?
So there is this almost paranoia among the Gadflies around accountability, in particular, the language in the eighth principle, that the proposed eighth principle, which mentions that our anti-racism work should take place with accountability to people of color. We do have a history of white Unitarian Universalists deciding what anti-racism work will benefit people of color without asking them and trying to do that. God bless them, their hearts were in the right place, and sometimes they get it very wrong. But the Gadflies have seized upon this word and printed in their newsletters things like, oh gosh, that people of color will be monitoring white people and enforcing. Where do you get this? But this is the
projection much?
Listen to me. If we had the time to monitor and enforce shit, don't you think we would have fucking have been doing this like years ago?
Also, have they met UUs?
We can't get enough volunteers for coffee hour.
Yeah, I know. I was
setting up a new NSA.
Right? Like
wiretapping.
But
and the idea that I would have interest in doing that is part of the thing that just chafes my hide, is that I want to take my time on this earth trying to find and police other white people. Like, that is not what I'm here for. Like, I'm glad that Sarah is out there doing the work that she's doing, because then I don't have to do it. I don't have to go and try and convince a congregation that that person has to go. But when I say it, it's because I'm me and Latina and queer and, said those things way back when and have an axe to grind. And so, yes, it's lovely. It is such a gift when a white identifying female minister will come and say, no, this is bullshit. Like, this needs to go.
Have some standards.
Yeah, this is Sarah.
Janine was trying to get in there.
This is Sarah doing the. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I can say that, like, we can say here in this room that it sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds absolutely ridiculous that the UUA is A, organized enough, B, has the resources, or C, would ever desire to police congregations in that way. But I can tell you, one of my beloved congregations that I serve in Arizona had actual lay leaders. When we went to the congregation and had an open conversation, we were like, look, I see the emails that you're circulating among you. You seem real worried. Let's talk about it. Let's have an open conversation. Let's do a Q&A. Here we are. And I had folks that were really worried. They said, I read on the Fifth Principle blog that if we vote in Article 2 and it has this word accountability, that when we send in our numbers to the UUA every year and we have to send in demographic information, the UUA is going to read those and they're going to tell us we're not diverse enough and they're going to take away our church. And I mean, that is not happening, but like they actually needed us in their church to tell us that is not going to happen. And so when we talk about accountability, what I love about your work, Sarah, is that you're encouraging boards to create accountability in their own church. Because when we talk about accountability, we mean accountability first in your congregation, and then accountability with each other's congregations and in a larger movement. But really, like, we had to spend a lot of time convincing that church, when we talk about accountability here, we're talking about accountability to each other. And so in your congregation, if someone is hurting you, don't you want that person to not be able to harm people anymore? Like, what is your right relationship process? What is your covenant? That's what we mean here. And I think there's this fear that's actually, Article 2 is being used as a wedge issue by this movement, because they're trying to say the UUA, whatever that means to them, is going to take away your principles. The UUA is going to take away your church. The UUA is going to force you to change. And that is not at all what's happening. And so putting accountability in the context of accountability to each other and empowering boards to create that process in their own congregations, I think is a way that really honors congregational polity and kind of our bottom up grassroots structure that we have, instead of this top down, like you have to do this, that the narrative is creating.
And let's be real, like one of the reasons that Sarah and I can go in and consult in congregations now and be able to say these things is because we've been run out of congregations, right? And we have had to have make a different way for our ministry to be heard and to fulfill our call, because we have been in congregations where accountability has not been required, it has not been embraced, and it has been to the detriment of typically Black and brown people, but you people who are saying the things that will lead us to liberation. And so I definitely want to lift up that it comes at a cost. It definitely comes at a cost, and I'm not unaware of that for you, Sarah. And one of the ways I first heard about you and your ministry and what you were doing, and you were doing lots of things before this, it was just me. This is just when I heard it, was when you gave a sermon at UU in the UU congregation in Eugene, Oregon, and talked very specifically about the gadfly, and that is available on YouTube, and really just kind of went through like why this wasn't an issue of censorship, because hello, you can still buy it on Amazon, or trying to take away somebody's freedom of speech. It was an issue of accountability and consequence. Like, you can have free speech as long as you're prepared for the accountability and consequence to that speech. And that has been sorely lacking in not just in the gadflies, but I think in Unitarian Universalism for a long time.
I think in whiteness for a long time.
Can we speak for a minute about this free speech thing?
Yes.
Sure.
It's such a sleight of hand to frame this conversation about free speech, right? The gadflies say that their rights to speak are being infringed upon, which, first of all, why are they still talking and I can still hear them? But
can't have both.
You can say whatever you want, but that doesn't guarantee that you will be free from social consequences, such as people being upset with you when you've hurt them. And ours is a covenantal faith, meaning we agree how we're going to be together. Right? This is not a matter of their individual beliefs being trampled upon, but about how that they've treated people. But I want to say that if a person has never experienced real persecution and real oppression, and they believe that they have a right, they are entitled to say anything they want and never get any pushback and just go about their merry way, then yeah, I can absolutely see how for them, consequences might seem like persecution.
And that is very real. And that's what we saw, as the blowback from, the hiring controversy is we really saw that that when push came to shove and some white folks lost their jobs, white male ministers lost their jobs, it gets ugly really fast, right? It gets really ugly really fast. And because of that reaction that you're talking about, that reaction of, what do you mean they weren't able to say all of the things that we want them to say? And then we know that they have consequences. Now, mind you, many of these consequences came with golden parachutes of, upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars. But yet the perception was that these poor persecuted white male ministers were somehow being shunned or losing their jobs or what have you, because there were consequences for their actions and their words.
Can I sort of like spitball something, just thinking out loud? I'm remembering over the past year watching Sarah's baby via Facebook experience each new thing.
Yes.
Right? Each new thing was either a delight beyond expression or the absolute worst thing that had ever happened to her. Right? Which is actually true, because she's only got so much experience, so it might actually be the worst thing that has ever happened.
Right.
Right? When you're 2 months old, like, your experience of worse things is pretty limited. And I'm also thinking about, the current, like, tangerine menace down there in Florida, who is now experiencing for the first time in his life a lack of power, a lack of control that he has no muscle memory for. So he is responding like it is the worst thing in the world to ever happen to him, because it is.
It is.
It is, and it's when they are most dangerous. Right?
Absolutely.
This
And
is
so
the
talk
moment
about
in
the
which.
danger.
Oh yeah,
What's
absolutely.
that?
I was just gonna say, can we talk about the
Absolutely. And what I
danger
was
of what
Yeah,
could happen?
we
in
can
this
definitely
process?
talk about the danger, like the danger that we see
but
of.
can I get
Go ahead.
can I get to the and so we've got this group of people who have never been held accountable in this way, who have no muscle memory on how to not win every argument. And so they're collectively losing their shit, like a 2-month-old, who bumped her finger for the first time. Because this is a catastrophe of epic proportions, because it is absolutely foreign to anything they have ever experienced. This is not to say that they get to use that as an excuse to do terrible, terrible things, but it's sort of a way to understand, like, the mechanics of their thinking and their brains as what's going on here. So, okay, I just needed to get all the way through that thought. So,
Yeah.
Kiana Dene, danger.
Yeah, because I think
danger.
It's important that we know who we're looking out for. But I think for me, to go back to children, it's not just that we take their hand away from the stove. We say, if you put your hand on the stove, you will get burned and it will hurt. So I think I want to understand or connect with our last few seconds here. What are the dangers of allowing the gadfly movement to expand unchecked or without any accountability? Can we speak to that? And I'm not the person to speak to it. Let's be clear. I'm asking.
Well, I
Just-
will say historically, as an organizer, if you look at any movement that has ever happened in the history of ever, when the strategy is to ignore it and it will go away, that has always been a losing strategy. Always. The first reaction to any growing fascist movement tends to be, oh, this isn't really us. This is just a fringe group. This is just, less than 10%. It won't affect us. This isn't who we are. And we should just ignore it and keep doing what we're doing. And that has always been a losing strategy. There's never been a time that that's worked. And so we need to get strategic and change our strategy. And I think Sarah's example of talking about it openly, about being proactive, about training boards on covenant and accountability and holding their own people accountable in congregations, that's the strategy. That's it.
Here are two real dangers, briefly. The gadflies on the national level have spoken explicitly about their intention to take over church boards to secure the church finances for themselves, right? To take over churches. And this has happened in a couple of cases. Churches have literally schismed and had to split in half. The other, I run a support group for ministers who've been forced out of their churches by gadflies or are in danger of being forced out. And it has almost 36 members.
Jesus.
Wow.
And the dangers, that we see the dangers we see in our greater society are the actual hunt for trans children, right? They are coming after our children. They are coming after our babies. They are caging our babies and our children at the borders, right? We have slavery, we have modern day slavery in our incarcerated institutions.
We have bills where people can now check the genitalia of children in Kansas.
Exactly. So this is it's not just like, oh,
within
these
the
people may
church.
get to say some shitty things and people may get their feelings hurt. No, this is actually real danger. And it's
Yes.
real danger for real people. I've been stalked. I've had my children stalked. I mean, like, this is not hyperbole. It's not anything that hasn't actually happened. And it's up to us, all of us, getting back to that Article 2 conversation, it is up to all of us to be aware. And if you can hear my voice on this, you can hear Sarah's voice on this. She's got a great YouTube channel. She's got a Medium channel, and she's got a website, and all of those are in the show notes to go get educated. Because I was having a conversation with another UU consultant of color who would both go out and do anti-racism work in our congregations, and we were talking about the number of times I'm willing to help somebody understand when they don't understand, right? When they don't understand what white supremacy is. And you get me for one, maybe two times. And all my materials and all the resources that I can give you and all of the things. And if after you've engaged with everything that I've given you and everything that I've said, you still want to sea lion me, and check the show notes for Sarah, Reverend Sarah, talking about what sea lioning is, you don't get me anymore. Because now you're purposefully obfuscating the situation so that you're holding everybody else hostage until you understand. And that is not okay. So we could do more on this, and we will be inviting Reverend Sarah back. Next week we have, oh my gosh, I'm going to say this wrong. Do we have Joy Berry next week? Yes. Yeah. DC Fortune. Okay, next week we have the Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, UUA presidential candidate. We are so excited for that. And until then, everyone, please Get out there, do what you can, talk to your friends, make sure that all of Unitarian Universalism knows what's going on. It's on all of us. Be well.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The View.